You are going to die. And right now, somewhere in the back of your brain, you already know that. But here's what nobody asks. What happened the very first time a human watched someone they knew stop breathing and didn't know what death even was? Not medieval peasants. Not ancient Egyptians with their elaborate tombs and golden masks. We're going back further. 300,000 years. 400,000 years. Back before religion, before ritual, before any concept of a soul or an afterlife or a god who might be keeping score. Just a group of early humans standing over a body. Confused, probably terrified, with no framework whatsoever for what had just happened. What they did next didn't just reveal something about death. It revealed something about what makes us human in the first place. But first, let's ask the question nobody thinks to ask. Did early humans even understand that death was permanent? This sounds like a strange question. Of course they understood death. They hunted animals. They watched things die constantly. But understanding that an animal dies and understanding that you will die, that the person standing next to you, the one you recognize, the one whose voice you know, can simply stop existing. Those are two completely different cognitive events. And for a very long time, researchers assumed early humans processed both the same way. They were wrong. In 2013, a team of paleoanthropologists working in a cave system in South Africa called the Rising Star Cave made a discovery that rewrote everything. Deep inside the cave, in a chamber so narrow the excavation team had to be selected based on shoulder width, they found bones, hundreds of them, belonging to at least 15 individuals of a species called Homo naledi. A species with a brain roughly 1/3 the size of yours. The bones hadn't been dragged there by predators. There were no claw marks. There were no signs of flooding or natural deposit. The only way those bodies got into that chamber was if other members of the group carried them there, deliberately, through complete darkness, into a space that had no other purpose. Homo naledi was doing something with its dead. And it was doing it intentionally. The researcher who led that excavation, paleoanthropologist Lee Berger, said the implications were almost uncomfortable to accept. Because deliberate body disposal, the act of treating a dead member of your group as something other than an obstacle or a food source, requires a specific kind of thought. It requires recognizing that the body was someone, that it deserved something, that the group's relationship with that individual didn't simply end when the breathing stopped. That is not a survival instinct. That is something else entirely. But here's where it gets stranger. Homo naledi almost certainly didn't have language. It didn't have religion. It didn't have any concept of an afterlife we could identify. And yet it was already doing what every human civilization after it would do in some form. It was refusing to simply leave, now push the timeline forward. About 100,000 years ago, in a cave in what is now Israel, archaeologists found the oldest known intentional burial. A Neanderthal child, laid in a shallow grave, placed on its side, knees pulled toward the chest. A position that looked, to every researcher who studied it, almost exactly like sleep. Think about that choice. Out of every position a body could be placed in, someone chose sleep. They weren't doing it for hygiene. They weren't doing it because the ground was easier to dig that way. They made that choice because it meant something to them. Because somewhere in the prehistoric mind, the line between sleep and death was still blurry enough that maybe the position mattered. And that blurry line is exactly where religion was born. Because here's the thing about death that is unique to humans. Every other animal on the planet encounters a dead body and eventually moves on. Elephants are the famous exception. They will linger near a dead herd member, touch the bones, return to the site years later. But even elephants don't bury their dead. They don't choose a position. They don't place objects alongside the body. Humans do. And humans have been doing it for so long, and in so many disconnected cultures across the world, that archaeologists use intentional burial as one of the primary markers for behavioral modernity. The moment a species starts burying its dead is roughly the moment it starts thinking symbolically. The two behaviors appear together in the fossil record so consistently that researchers now treat them almost as the same event: bury your dead. Think in symbols. They arrived together. But why? 5. The most compelling answer comes not from archaeology, but from cognitive science. In 2006, psychologist Jesse Bering published research on what he called the afterlife belief instinct. Bering argued that the human brain, 5, because it is built to simulate other minds, to imagine what other people are thinking, feeling, intending, cannot easily simulate the absence of a mind. When someone you know dies, 5, your brain keeps running their mental simulation anyway. You think about what they would say. You imagine their reaction. You hear their voice in your head making a comment they never made. This isn't grief playing tricks on you, 5. This is your brain doing exactly what it was built to do. It just can't turn off the simulation of a mind it knew well. And for early humans with no framework for death, no vocabulary for gone, 5, no concept of biological finality, that simulation wouldn't have felt like a glitch. It would have felt like evidence. Evidence that the person was still there, somewhere, just not visible. 5. That feeling that the dead are still present in some form is arguably the seed of every religion ever practiced on Earth. Not theology, not divine revelation, just a brain doing what brains do. 5. Unable to accept that someone it knew has simply stopped existing. The grave goods came next. In sites across Europe, Africa, and Asia, dating back between 100,000 and 30,000 years, archaeologists find the same pattern. 5. Bodies buried with objects, red ochre, the same pigment used in the oldest known art, spread across the bones. Animal teeth, shells, tools the person used in life. Nobody told these people to do this. No scripture commanded it. 5. No priest organized it. Different cultures on opposite sides of the planet, with no contact between them, arrived at the same instinct independently. Put something in the ground with them. Send them off with something. 5. Which means this behavior wasn't cultural. It was human. In Sungir, Russia, researchers found the burial of 2 adolescents placed head to head, dating back around 34,000 years. Their bodies were covered in more than 10, 5, Zirzo hand-carved mammoth ivory beads. Producing a single one of those beads would have taken roughly 45 minutes. The math means that the community spent somewhere close to 500 hours of actual human labor, decorating the burial of 2 children. Children who would never see it. Children who were already gone. That is not practical. That is love expressed in the only language available. 5. And that is the detail that changes everything about how we think of early humans. We tend to picture them as primitive, as closer to animals than to us, as people driven purely by survival and hunger and fear. But you do not spend 500 hours decorating a grave for someone you did not grieve. You do not choose a sleeping position for a child you thought of as nothing more than a body. These people felt loss. They felt it the same way you do. 5. The same weight in the chest, the same inability to accept that someone who was here is no longer here. The only difference is they had no words for it yet, no rituals handed down to them, no one to tell them what to do. 5. So they invented it all themselves. And what they invented was staggering. They invented ceremony. They invented the concept of honoring someone after death. They invented the idea that a life, even after it ends, 5, still means something to the people left behind. Every funeral that has ever been held on this planet, every candle, every song, 5, every stone placed on a grave, is a continuation of what those first humans started when they carried a body into a narrow cave and chose not to leave it behind. Here's the part that stays with you. 5. Modern anthropologists who study grief across cultures have found one behavior that appears in every single human society ever documented. Without exception, every culture